stop like we always do a little around 7 and take a 10, 12-minute break so everybody can get up. I know these days are long for those of us that are faculty. I'm sure they're long for you guys too. It's hard. So I'm acknowledging this is hard. I know it's hard for y'all. It's hard for us. We really just want normal, and I'm not sure when that's going to happen. So let's talk about socialization. One of the things in socialization, to understand what socialization is, think about this from a standpoint of socialization is how we learn to be humans, to be members of society, to be the religion that our parents are, to understand what does it mean to be married. All of these things, it's a process of where we are taught to be members of society and also members of our family, our community. And so it is based on the idea that there are social norms and values. That there are social norms and values. And that these social norms and values that we're talking about, also the expectations is to where you're accepting that society's beliefs and the societal values. So you've learned this through interactions with people in your community, with your parents, with your church elders, with your other relatives, your grandmothers, aunts, uncles, cousins. You've learned what socialization is. You've been socialized. And one of the things about the idea of being socialized is that the only way that we can learn and be socialized is to be around other people and to have a model. So we have to have someone that we're watching do and say the right things. And that's part of socialization. Another, part of socialization is that all of this is hinging on not just who we are as ourselves, but also this idea of developing ourselves, of self-developing and self-development. And all of this, we have to understand that the self becomes socialized. And this is what we're talking about. So, and we're looking at social theories of self-development. We have Herbert Mead, and Mead is the one that studies self, and he studies the self as a distinct identity, and that in order to engage in this idea, this process of self, that we have to be able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and look at the world through their perspective. So we have to be able to see the world through someone else's viewpoint, through their lens, through their perspective. And what that does is that helps us become self-aware as we look at ourselves from the perspective of the other person, the other individual. And so Mead believed that there is a path of development that all people go through. Then what they do, they go through this development, and there are stages. And that these stages they're the preparatory stage, and then we have a imitation, a play stage, and then we have the game stage, which is where we're trying to act. We're trying to look at different roles all at one time, different times, and then we are developed. And at this stage, the final stage is to understand the generalized other. And so let's go back and just look at these stages a little bit. And so what we can look at in the stages is that we have this preparatory stage. And this preparatory stage is where we can, as children, we only imitate. We can't imagine. So we watch what you do. We see you wave hi or bye, and then we find our hand, and then we go, and as a child you did this, and everybody goes, yay, because they raise their hand, and that's part of the socialization process. It's one of the first socialization aspects of realizing, it's one of the first ones of realizing that you can do something and get a response. Drinking your bottle is always great, but that's also around that same time frame. So but we're only at that time frame capable of imitation. So we can't imagine other people. And so all we are doing is imitating. And we're imitating people that we see. So you'll see these little kids on the internet, right? And they're like doing these little cute things and moving their hands and cocking their heads. And they're cute. These kids are adorable. And they're doing all these little things, and they're like, no. And a friend of mine who's a professor at UNLV, he and his wife are both professors, and they have a 2-year-old, and she is absolutely adorable. And so her birthday was yesterday, and so we have all these videos now of Ashani going, like she's singing a song and she's doing the little dance moves and she's doing it's really adorable, and she's just precious. And so it's been a lot of fun to be able to watch, her, not as a parent, but as an outside person watching a little kid on video. And because we were in graduate school together, we've known each other, for years and fairly close. So when we were looking at all of these videos, and I just think how precious that she's imitating, and her mom is a dancer. And so they're from Nepal, and so she does the Nepalese dance. It's really cool. But so the baby's already picking it up. So you can tell her mom is teaching her all of the dance, and it's really cool because she's little, but she's learning it. It's really fascinating. So, that's imitation. And so if we teach you to imitate very early, you imitate words, you imitate sounds, you imitate mannerisms, you imitate actions, then we can teach you and socialize you much better because you're already used to imitating. So, then you get a play stage. And the play stage, children begin to take on the role that someone might have. So you might see somebody's playing mom, somebody's playing dad, somebody's playing Supergirl, or who is Supergirl's sidekick, somebody's playing that one. They might see a chef. They might play chef in the kitchen, which is always fun. They get in there and play. Mine were into Doc McStuffins, so we went through our Doc McStuffins everything phase and how to fix toys, which meant we tore up more toys than we fixed. But all of this is play. So now you're behaving as somebody else. It might not even just be a person, it might be someone that's on a cartoon. So this is during that time that you have the little boys want to be the Spider-Man or the Black Panther or the Superman or any of the comic book characters, because they're identifying with those as role models. And they're also looking at how they act, and they're being socialized through that as well. Well, then the game stage, what we do is we start being able to imagine all the different roles at one time and how all of those roles interact with the other. And so then you can also understand the interactions with other people and how you interact with other people, but also how other people interact with them. And so at this stage, then the other thing that you start understanding is being aware of different jobs and different responsibilities. And so what do you have to do as a mom? What you have to do as a dad? What you have to do as a godparent? What you have to do as a worker? What do you have to do as a teacher? What do you know? So all of this, and so the children are learning how to do all of these different things, and then they're learning that how also to play different roles and play their parents, and in learning and picking up what they think that their parents want them to say or where they think they'll get into trouble. So that's also real fascinating. We're somewhere within that stage in the last year or two, and it's been fairly fascinating. So then we have this idea of the generalized other. And again, this is the expectations of greater society. And this is how we are viewed. It's a view of how we believe that other people are viewing us. We're trying to figure out how other people see us and perceive us. And by doing this, we can then understand this from a sociological perspective. Is there you are now having yourself. You've developed a self. Well, we have Kohlberg's theory of moral development, and moral development is this is how we understand being good or bad. And so again, there are stages. There's the pre-conventional stage, and then there's the conventional stage, and then the post-conventional stage. And it is basically that you see things as good and bad. And then what you then understand is this idea of people believing of morality, and then it's that good bad position of someone doing something, and is it bad, or is it bad only in this perspective? And so that's a lot of, I always laugh and say a lot of people have not developed to that post-conventional stage in society. So we'll see if that ever works. So then there's also Carol Gilligan is one of the main people that looked at Kohlberg's theory and said, all of this was only done with boys. So I didn't tell you that Kohlberg's theories were all about that. All he did was study boys. And so Gilligan says, so what happens with the gender and the gender bias? Okay. So then that's where we then have to look at the what would women do? How would women handle this? And we know women do things very differently than men. And part of this, though, is the idea that socialization makes us who we are, that it's not just us, but it's the people that are teaching us who we are. And then it's our understanding of what others perceive us to be. And so, one of the things, though, about socialization also is that it teaches culture. So, you're a new member into the society. So you're in a new you're in a culture, and you're a new member within that culture. And it's not just bringing someone in that they're now into a different culture. It's also, we have to socialize children, because we've got to not only teach them right and wrong, but we also need to teach them cultural and social, our group norms and values. And we also, has been this huge debate, and I'll let you just read it, on nature and nurture. And so who we are is a result of nurture, is what some people believe, the relationships that we have, and other people believe it's entirely based on genetics. And so, in a genetic realm, our temperament, our interests, our talent, everything is determined. And then we have no control over it. Everything is nature. And so, I'll let you read some of that if you care to. Let's look at agents of socialization. To me, this is the biggest part of all of this, is that we have basic groups that are our social groups, that are our experiences of socialization. And we learn our material culture, we learn the beliefs and values, we learn all of that. Okay. The first agent of socialization that we have is family. And so we have not just think just like your immediate family, but everybody in your family. And so you learn different things from different members of the family. And you also have friends, and your friends or your friends' parents also are big within the socialization. So, this is that thing of, we don't socialize our children in a vacuum. Many things come into how do we raise children. So we have to also look at historical time frame. I know one of the interesting perspective in this text is, that it says 60 years ago, being spanked with a belt or a wooden spoon was not considered, it wasn't a big deal. It was like, it was kind of normal. It wasn't overtly strict or child abuse. And so now that would be viewed very differently. People would look at that very differently. Or they might. It just depends on your socialization. There are still people that believe that spanking with a belt is corporal punishment, and it fits the level of severity of what's going on. But all of us do not socialize our children in this vacuum. So whatever we're believing, other people's beliefs are coming in at our children or at us. And so this is part of, that we have to understand, and as sociologists we do, that race, that class, that gender, that religion all plays a part in socialization. All of it. We have gender norms that people expect. We have peer groups. Your peer group is people who are your similar age and social status. And this starts in your young years. So in your peer group in your younger years. So the kids on the playground teach. So the big kids teach the younger kids about taking turns and learning the rules of the game and how do I shoot with the basketball. And so our first major socialization outside of our family is peer groups. And so so your peer group is a very important group, an agent of socialization. We also have institutional agents. We talk about school. We talk about religion, the workplace, and the government. And so when we're looking at the idea of school, we know that in K through 12, we spend 7 or 8 hours a day, 180 days a year in this classroom. And so we have to understand the classroom environment. So where do we sit? How do we sit? One of my real good friends is a kindergarten teacher, and she puts her, the kids sit in a circle on the floor for reading, and they all do whatever I forget what they call it, but it's some kind of, I don't know, something about sitting. It's some way that they sit when they're on the floor. I don't know what it's called. The kids come home and they go, and we do the butterfly sit. And I'm like, I have no idea what that is, but okay. So, anyway, we know that all of this, everything that we are teaching in school, it is institutional. We know that because of the number of students, because of any other thing. We as teachers we're like, hey, we'd love to have fewer kids in a classroom. It's different. And so you will find that different classrooms, here again, you have 10 kids in a class versus 30 kids in a class. When are you going to get more attention? You're going to get more attention when there's fewer students in a class. And that's extremely important in K-12. It's extremely important. So we're socializing you in the school, and we're looking at what it's informal teaching as well as formal teaching. So we have to look at, how are we grading? How are we what are we teaching students about grades? What are we teaching students about working together? And it's another reason why a lot of times you'll have group projects in the big world. Even in academics, we have group projects. So try to write with other academics, and it's, none of us can agree on where the comma goes half the time. So some of us swear allegiance to the Oxford comma and some do not. So you have these conversations, and it's kind of interesting between all of the professors. So but you're doing this too. And even as professors, we have to be socialized into our classroom environment. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but most professors did not go into their job to teach. They actually went in to do research. And some of us enjoy teaching, so that's what we do. Crisscross applesauce, hands in your, Christina, thank you. In pre-K. Oh, okay. I was wondering what it was called. So it's crisscross applesauce, hands in your lap. I love it. It's so cute. Thank you. Wow, the things you learn in sociology, right? So if you can just visualize this if you know what they're talking about. And so you can go, that is actually an agent of socialization in education to teach you this so that you do what? You put your hands in your lap and you're sitting on the floor and everyone is calm and steady. and your hands are in your lap so you're not touching other people. And so it's socialization. It's just this very simplistic thing is socialization. So, we also have the workplace. And think about if you've had jobs, and most of your jobs probably were not exactly the same. And even if they were the same, they might be a little different. So if you were working at Belk and you went to Dillard's, would it be the same experience or would you have a different experience? It would be somewhat similar in experience, but the culture within the workplace might be different. So think about where you've worked and think about, how many different jobs you had. And even if your different jobs might require different socialization. So, I mean, it's just really different. So think about religion. And I laugh about this because here's the thing. Religion, and we're in the South, so that's even bigger. We have all of these churches and mosques, and we have synagogues, and we have temples, and we have all these communities, these religious communities, and all of us pray differently in these different religions. We have different prayers. Some places may have what we call liturgical prayer, which it's a book and it has the prayer written down, and that's the prayer for that day. I should have brought that book. I've got it somewhere around here. And so when you see that, it tells you what the day is, and that's the prayer you say. Well, that's not at all like some other religions that pray. That's not at all how someone else might do it. Some people might just say, well, I'm going to talk to Jesus for a minute. And then you have some religions that they will pray and will kneel on a prayer rug. And so that is a whole different way of prayer in culture. But they're all doing the exact same thing. They're all praying. So while we're looking at this idea of socialization and understanding that we understand this aspect of socialization of the church, in the church, in religion, but we were not socialized in all religions. We were only socialized in the religion that our parents or our family or our grandparents chose. That's the one that we look at. So, and that we're introduced to, and that we go to. So that these are different. They're very different. So if you've gone to a different church, a different religious organization, then you understand, even if you're going, I'll give you an example. Even if you're going into different Baptist churches or evangelical churches, everything is different. None of them are the same. Their topic is not going to be the same. The music's not going to be the same. None of that is going to be the same. But I can go into the Catholic church in town, and I can go to the Catholic church. I can go to St. Teresa's, and I can walk in, and I can actually take my book that tells me what the prayers are and the songs are for that day, and I can walk into the church at St. Teresa's, and I will get the exact same liturgy, the same reading, the same song, the same everything that I would be getting at the 10 o'clock Sunday morning service at the cathedral in Mobile, Alabama. There you go. I'll get the same one. So my the religion, you might have things a certain way, but if you don't know that culture, you don't understand the culture. Also, we're talking about the government. And so one of the things that we have to think about is we're progressing through, our life, we have age norms. And so a lot of these are basically formed by the government. So the government says, okay, we don't think that you can drive a car until you're 15, but you have to have somebody with you in the car. And then when you turn 16, you have to take a test. And if you don't pass the test, then you do this. And if you pass the test, then you do that. And you can take the test at any time. It's just the youngest you can be is 16. And that's an age norm. And that's an age norm. We define an adult, usually we're talking about 18, but we might be talking about 21. And it depends on our definition and our identity of the word adult. And so as we look at this, we would say, all right, 18 is probably considered an adult for some things and 21 for others. And we also think about old age. Like, when does somebody say they're old? Well, we traditionally have this idea that 65 is old. That 65, because that was at that point that most people got their senior benefits. So Medicare and Social Security. We've actually moved that now. We're at 67. Now, also, we have these whole ideas of roles, and even the government has roles for us. So we have to look at our roles and our categories, such as what about taxpayer? So if you're working a job and you're paying in taxes, then you are considered a taxpayer. And there are rights and responsibilities that go along with being a taxpayer. It means on April 15th, you have to file your income tax. So that's a whole another thing that we're training you. The government is socializing you to the norms of the government. I'm not going to do the mass media. You guys can read that. It's kind of fascinating. But when we look at this idea of adulthood and socialization in adulthood, we may be told to settle down. You need to settle down. And part of this is not just getting married or things. It's like focus on a career path. And so we have these time frames even in our head, and they vary because because of socio-historical time, they vary. So adults also, not only like children have the play stage, adults have the anticipatory socialization. And so for that, you're looking at preparation for new life roles. So you might, if you're anticipating being a parent, you might read a baby care book or a name book. If you have a job, you might start looking at paying for retirement or saving money. And so all of these new life roles, despite social structure that supports it, can be difficult. This anticipatory socialization. So we also have resocialization. And I'm going to use just one of the typical ideas of resocialization. We have older adults that go to senior care. They may move to a nursing facility or a continuing care retirement community, a CCRC. Or, we have these different things. So all of what we did prior to going into a CCRC or anything is nothing at all like what we will experience. And one of the reasons is that you are somewhere where you are not with your next door neighbors, and you kind of have to start figuring out how this operation works. How does this place work? And so we re-socialize you. It's just like, as we call teaching little kids socialization. Now you're having to change environments. We do re-socialization as you get older and when you change where you live. We do re-socialization when people are anticipating getting out of prison, or so we say we do. It's a whole nother question. We have re-socialization when you go into the military. The military, you all wear, if you're in the military, everyone wears the same outfit. They use the same shoes. They have to wear the same headgear. Everything that they do, there is no identity of them at all other than their name and their uniform. And so they are given a new identity that matches the military society. And they learned new rules. And they follow a structured schedule. And they have to keep everything clean. And they have to do all of this other stuff. So after having done all of this, then when they leave the military, they also have to have another process of re-socialization. And re-socialization then for that means now you have to realize you are no longer a military personnel, you are a civilian. So we've basically come to the end of chapter 5. If it's okay, I will go ahead and say we have 10 minutes. Let's say 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and run over chapter 6. So 10 minutes. Okay, so we're going to be looking now at chapter 6. So chapter 6 is groups and organizations. Now, when we talk about groups, and particularly we have these political groups, and you can read about this, but this was what the Tea Party came up with in 2014, so 6 years ago. And you can look at what their 15 non-negotiable core beliefs were. Some of these people, you will understand who they are as you read what their belief system is, and it's pretty fascinating. Where all they came from and who came in to Congress under that. But one of the things when we look at groups are very big in our life. So again, our family, um, our groups also have a role as socialization, which we saw in chapter 5, but they also help with the structure of society. And so, if we look at groups through a functionalist, conflict, and an interactionist perspective, we can look at this big picture, a macro level view at the functionalist perspective that looks how different aspects of society, how these are all enmeshed or intertwined. And so remember, the functionalist system, the functionalist perspective believes that everything we're trying to get back to equilibrium. So if we're in chaos, we're trying to get back to equilibrium. And so that's how the functionalist is, that all parts working are necessary for a whole. Now, in conflict theory, the conflict perspective is also from a macro level view. And so someone studying the Tea Party might look at how business interest manipulated the system over the last 30 years. So we could look at that. And if we looked at that perspective, we might also look at a redistribution of wealth from the middle class to the upper class. So how something like that would lead to an idea of the previous proletarian, the bourgeoisie, in that we had this different Marxist structure in mind of conflict. And the other perspective is symbolic interaction or interactionist perspective. And so we're just looking at groups at a very micro level, that we're just taking the day-to-day interaction of the groups. So we might look not just at the group in maybe Virginia, but the group in New York versus the group in Atlanta. So if you read an answer to, I think it was discussion 3, when I wrote about parrot heads, Jimmy Buffett and the parrot heads. One of the things about group dynamics is the group that is in Atlanta is vastly different than the one that a friend of mine is in, that's in Paris, or one that is in London, or one that is in the Caribbean, or one. So the groups, they may be groups, but they are. We would have to look at them instead of an overall Jimmy Buffett fan club. We would have to look at the micro level groups, and so that might be the way that we look at it from symbolic interactionism. But when we're talking about group, we're talking about all different types of what are we considering a group. So it could be 2 people in a group project. It could be 5 people. You could be a group, could be a club. It could be a few of your friends that you do something constantly together, people you share a hobby with. But any of this, it refers to a collection of at least 2 people who interact with some frequency and share a sense that their identity is aligned with that group. So for those of you who participate in Greek life, that would also be something completely different. So we have this other definition of group, which is called an aggregate. And this is people who exist in the same place at the same time, but do not interact or share an identity sense. So all of us just lined up at Starbucks or waiting in the lobby for McDonald's. We're not interacting. We don't have a shared sense of identity. We are just all in the same place at the same time. and that's an aggregate. Now, group people who share similar characteristics but are not tied to anyone to each other in another way, these people are considered a category. And so you know about the millennials and the baby boomers and the this and the that. And so you know about that group. They're categories. They do not interact with each other as a whole frequently. They may somewhat share an identity, but they may not. Now, a group, an aggregate or a category can become a group, but they might remain a group, but then after a time, they may just go back to really not being anything. They may have been a group or a category, but then they may have moved into a group from a category or aggregate. But you can also have many groups within a single category. And so your text actually does a fairly good job of explaining this. But I always just say to stick with what do we think a group is? And the group, it's just, let's look at the group. Okay? We could think about the aggregate, but that's just people, and you may never see these people again. Or you may see all of this group every single day at the same Starbucks or eating at the same restaurant. But you still have nothing, no sense of identity. You may see them, but you have no sense of identity. Now, Charles Horton Cooley said that groups can be divided. So we have groups, then we have a division of groups into a primary group and a secondary group. So primary group, that's usually our small group. It's individuals who we are maybe best friends. We have long-term emotional ways. The group is there for the group. Okay, so the primary group is your best friend, the most impact, your family, significant others. But the secondary group is larger. They may just have an instrumental function. Their role is more task oriented. We're just there to get our group done, our group work done. So secondary group, a secondary group, they serve an instrumental function. Instrumental. And it can be that they have a class project, they have something else. And also this group this secondary group can morph into a primary group. So you'll see that if you go to graduate school and everyone is together and you're studying and you're learning and you're hanging out, because there is no life in graduate school other than school. One of the biggest things is then that you find that you turn into a primary group. That everyone has the face-to-face contact. So we also have in-groups and out-groups. William Sumner came up with this concept. And an in-group is the group that you feel you belong to, and you believe it to be an integral part of who you are. An out-group is the opposite, that you feel you do not belong to, and you may feel disdain, anger, or competition in relationship to an out-group. So when we talk about in-groups, we're talking about Greek life. We're talking about unions. We're talking about sports teams and out groups. You know, you can belong to this, or you can be an outsider to this. And so we look at these groups that you could be an inside or an outside. And so someone says, well, how does that work? Well, if I'm a Saints fan and someone is a Falcons fan, then we're in our in group because number one, we're really into our sports teams. So we're an in group in our sports team environment. And then when I see your sports team, I'm a member of the out group. I'm an outsider of that group. And remember, your primary and secondary groups are in and out groups. So there are different ways to look at this. If we define others as not like us, then in groups begin to practice ethnocentrism. And that means that we are judging people negatively based on their race, their sex, their religion, their culture, their sexuality. And so that may also be something that you'll want to think about how that works as well from another aspect of what is happening in the bigger world. We are not, my husband and I are not, we watch football. We're Auburn fans. We both graduated from Auburn. So that's kind of, we really have not followed a lot of major teams. When I lived in another state, I was a big New Orleans Saints fan, and we moved to Ohio, and I liked the Browns. I refused to cheer for anybody but the Cleveland Browns. And that's another story because I had a friend that was an NFL player that played for Cleveland, so that was kind of it. But one of the things that we look at is when you're at a Super Bowl party. So while we were in Ohio, Indiana played New Orleans. And so you can believe that I walked into the party decked out in black and gold with my fleur-de-lis, and I really acted kind of nasty about it. But I was in a whole room of Indiana people, and I was like, I'm a member of an out group, I'm an out group. I have to represent my team. And so, it's kind of funny if we think about it from a football perspective, a lot of times that makes sense if we think about it that way. And we also have reference groups. And reference groups are groups of people that we compare ourselves to. And it's like your peer group. We pay attention to what our friends wear, our peers wear. We listen to what music they like. What do they do with their free time? We compare ourselves with our classmates. We might compare ourselves to our siblings. So all of our ideas of reference groups, this can be cultural, this can be workplace, family. It can be, your reference groups get different messages. So you might have this idea that, when you get out of school, you're going to have all this money, and, you're going to have this gorgeous apartment, and you're going to have this great car, and you're going to go out and you're going to do all this great stuff. And, the money is not what you think it is. When you get out in the big world and start spending it, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Hold on. That's not enough money. So one of the things that, we have this cultural norm and cultural idea of where we should be. Not also, if we think back on our age norms, that by this time I should have this, and this time I should have this, and by this point I should have this, and by this I should have that. And so all of this is reference group. We use reference groups to help to monitor, guide, and help our behavior, show us what the social norms are, how can we dress, how are we expected to dress, what types of shoes are we expected to wear. And so, one of the things about a reference group too, when you figure out your reference group, it also kind of helps you understand the identities and the social identities that you have or you want to have or do. So we talk about dyads and triads, and a dyad is just a small group. It's two people, and a triad is a 3-member group. So if we have a dyad group and one person quits the group no longer exists. And so in a triad, though, it's vastly different, because if someone leaves that group, there's still 2 more. And so the group continues. Small groups, if you go in and you do therapy, if you're a social worker or you are in a field of mental health or therapy, a lot of times you'll do small group work. And small groups tend to not think big and in large goals. And so, we also don't know when a small group becomes a large group. And so it might be, what do we do about that? The larger the group, the more attention, but at the same time, the larger the group, there becomes more conflict, more division, and lack of cohesion. And so we might look at that and say that is not helpful for a group to get too big. And you'll actually hear people say they got too big. Their store got too big. That church got too big. So large organizations typically have a lot more opinions and a lot more division and a lot less cohesion. Now, when we talk about leadership function, we talk about leadership, and groups, particularly large groups, have to have leadership. You guys are learning about leadership as you were going along in school. You'll have a lot more opportunities to show leadership on campus in the next few years. So, leadership is sometimes overt. There's more defined roles and responsibilities. And other groups have formal leaders, but the styles and function of the leadership are different. So you might have instrumental leaders who are very goal oriented, or you might have expressive leaders. And expressive leaders would be more concerned with your emotional strength, your mental health, your health, and do you feel supported? And so when we talk about expressive leaders, we're looking at like rabbis and priests and social service coordinators or programs. Gender roles have changed a lot, but those of us who exhibit an opposite gender manner, a lot of times we receive resistance. So for women, even though we are really competent, if we are very assertive, or we basically just say, this is what I think, and here is what I think is the best idea, we're considered pushy. But if men do that, they are considered really good leaders, and wow, what a great leader. So we still have this idea from a gender perspective that women are more expressive leaders, and there are many women who are not. And you will see them along the way that they are not expressive, and some of them are not even good leaders. So that's kind of even worse. You'll find men in those positions too that really they were promoted. Sometimes you'll find that, and we call it where the pink, it's kind of like the pink tax as a female, that a male, and I will say this, in elementary schools, many times a male will become the principal of a middle school or a high school before a female will, simply because of the idea of leadership and instrumental and leadership function. And they may not have the skill, but a lot of times people like to see male leaders. Men and women prefer leaders to use a combination of both expressive and instrumental, but that's not coming across. And so we also talk about this idea of leadership styles. And so there's three different styles of leadership. You can have democratic leaders, and they encourage group participation in all decision making. They're a lot of times we have this kind of structure in a school club, and that we vote on what activities or projects we're going to go and work. A lot of people feel like that the Democratic leader goes too slow because of the process. But there's also an idea of a laissez-faire leader, which is they just are hands off. They allow group members to self-manage and make their own decision. So there's then finally an authoritarian leader, and they issue orders and assign tasks. And so these types of leaders are really instrumental with a strong focus on goals. And so they alienate workers a lot of times. This type of leadership can be required in some things, but it might not be, because it's because authoritarian, you may not feel like that someone who is just issuing orders and assigning tasks to meet a goal is taking all of the other bigger picture in line. So one of the last things within groups that to me kind of is a interesting point is conformity. So a lot of times we talk about we love to be individual. We might dress an individualistic way. We might wear our hair an individualistic way. So we're not going to conform to any one group norm or expectation. But then when we really look at it, it's kind of interesting. We do conform a lot. So we do use our reference groups to determine what's okay and how to dress and what can we do. And so we also have to look at this idea of, do we prefer to conform or do we prefer to be singled out? And so think about that. Who are you? Are you a person that likes to conform to what other people are wearing and kind of wear the same outfit, the same style? Or do you prefer to stand out? And so I always think that that's an interesting question to ask. And then the other thing is when you get in your group, your family, your best friends, your little group, ask them that question. Ask them the question of, do you like to stick out or do you like to conform? And some of the group will determine that they really do not like to stick out. They would prefer to just not be noticed. And so they'll be more conforming in that perspective. But just ask. That's always an interesting question to ask your besties. I think you'll find out that within groups, particularly if it's within like a friend group, you'll have one or two of the members of the group who are the front and center people, and then you'll have other members of the group where it is they are not they're not wanting to be noticed. So I think that will be interesting for you to see. One of the pages in formal organizations has this great chart, and so it talks about the different types of formal organization: the normative or voluntary, the coercive, or the utilitarian. Now, the coercive is that we have to be pushed or coerced to join. This might be like having to go to rehab, or in a normative might be like a voluntary organization. So it might be the Conservation Society or the Audubon Society or something that brings you together as a volunteer with other people. And then there's a utilitarian, which is basically we need a specific reward. So high school, workplace, these organizations are for one benefit, like to finish a diploma, a degree, or to make money. And so you have this utilitarian organization. And so it gives the ideas of the benefit of membership, the type of membership, and the feeling of connectiveness. And so I like that little chart. I think that's a really good one. Now, we also want to talk just briefly about clear division of labor. If we're in a bureaucracy, which is an ideal type of a formal organization, then we have to have our clear division of labor. We have a specialized task to perform. And so this is one of the very interesting things is when, as a professor, you think my job is to teach class. My job is also to do all these other things. If I don't know the answer, I'm to try to help you find who to talk to. If I don't know all the answers to financial aid, or I don't know all the answers to a lot of your stuff. But if that's the case, then what we have to do is we have to say, that's not my job. I'm not trained for that job. And there's a clear division of labor. So then there's also explicit rules. And so the rules are, within the bureaucracy, there's explicit rules that talk about how everyone is supposed to act. What happens if you plagiarize? What happens if you are cyberbully? And so there might be a whole technology chapter in your student handbook. There also has to be a hierarchy of authority within a bureaucracy. And so it's just one person, one individual, or one officer is in charge. And that's it's called a you have to have these particular things. Weber talks about a bureaucracy having a hierarchy of authority, a clear division of labor, explicit rules, and the other thing is impersonality. And so we don't have any personal feelings invested. We're taking that out. All we're doing is we're protecting the organization. So we become more efficient and effective, and as a bureaucracy, we can do that. We don't have to have a personal conversation on it. And so there are some positive aspects of bureaucracies, basically to provide efficiency and equal opportunities, but there are also some bureaucracies are just not, they've not moved forward. So, as we now move into the post-industrial information age perspective, this bureaucratic idea of the slow moving, the protocols can actually decrease productivity and efficiency. So we have to be now more problem solving, more creative, and we really have to say, have the idea that, we can do better if we are outside of a bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy is holding us back. And so that's part of that positioning that bureaucracies come from, mainly because they grew as institutions when a small group of privileged white men held all of the cards. They had all of the power. And so while we might say, well, you too can move up based on meritocracy, based on hard work, bureaucracies can actually perpetuate the balance of power only by recognizing the merit in a traditional male and privileged path. And we could have a huge, long Goffmanian conversation about what is a traditional male, how do you define them, what do they look like, and it's not who you think it is. So Goffman wrote on that, and it's very interesting. So I'll find all of that and show it to you maybe next week. It's really interesting. Okay, then we have this whole idea that of the McDonaldization of society. And actually, this is Ritzer talks about this as the fast food business model. And so we are now using the fast food business model in other things. So, not just fast food. So now we have our grocery stores. We have a whole idea of where things should be laid out. Everything is considered to make it efficient, predictable, calculable, and controlled. And so you can go into a store, let's say a Publix or a Kroger, and you can go into that store or Harris Teeter, and you know what you're going to be able to find. You know what products are in that store. You know that that store is going to have that thing. Now, we also know that we would be able to find someone that worked there because they all wear the same uniform or the same shirt. And we know that there are higher profits in that. It's easier to advertise with a chain than it is on your own in your private business. Because as a chain, you have automatic name recognition. Think about McDonald's. Think about that. So you also can think about, chicken from, a family-owned chicken restaurant or chicken from Buffalo Wild Wings or McDonald's chicken nuggets. I mean, so we think about this whole difference. We don't know, and this is one thing that in my crew, my 2 7-year-olds, if they're not the right kind of chicken nuggets, they're not eating them. So, you wonder if you go somewhere and it's not the right kind of chicken nuggets and you go to a local food place, they may not want it. They may not eat it. And so, you have to, because children too are socialized that this is what it looks like, or this is what the texture is, and this is what it tastes like. So that's kind of a little different and interesting. Well, one of the things that I find really fascinating about groups is that we have this need to form a group. We feel like as humans, we have to have a group to be embedded in. And this is a good and a bad thing. And part of it has to do with socialization, and part of it has to do with why are we choosing that group? And so, or why did that group choose us? So these are always fascinating questions when you're looking at groups and how they operate. So if you're involved in a group, an organization, a volunteer, or anything like that, think about how the leadership is structured. Think about who is coming and going in the group. Is there change? So I always find that students do really well in this section because they can put themselves into a group and will acknowledge that some groups they did not feel comfortable with and some they did. Actually, I think that you guys may be a little bit more in tune with what group you don't fit into and what group you do than my age group. So I think you guys have a little bit better understanding of yourself than we did. That's a compliment. You guys did something right. Since everybody always hammers you all the time, I get it. So Awesome. Any questions? Any questions? So we've done chapter 5 and 6. Any questions?